Washington.
It's going to be the most interesting era in media the next year since at least the beginning of television in the late 40s.
Welcome to the Washington Tech Policy Podcast. We deliver the latest tech policy news and brightest tech policy experts to you, wherever you are, so you can stay productive, relevant, and informed in less time. From Washington, D.C., it's the Washington Tech Policy Podcast with Joe Miller.
A new $250 million election security spending bill gets Mitch McConnell's support. What caused him to change his mind? Facebook suspends tens of thousands of apps for raising red flags about how they share Facebook's users' data, and Jeff Cole is my guest. Mitch McConnell, whom Democrats have started to call Moscow Mitch, backed a $250 million spending bill last week to help states beef up election security. McConnell had previously blocked two bills that would have boosted security and required paper ballots. Facebook has suspended tens of thousands of apps after an internal audit revealed that they could either have been a threat or didn't respond to Facebook's requests for information. Facebook says the move comes after a review of millions of apps following the Cambridge Analytica scandal. The FTC fined Facebook $5 billion over the summer for privacy violations. Meanwhile, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg was in town meeting with members of Congress and President Trump at the White House, meetings which sources say were constructive. Well, there's not much else we can say about the 71st Emmy Awards other than the fact that this year's awards offered shockingly little diversity. National Urban League CEO Mark Morial and FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel penned a joint op-ed in The Hill released prior to the awards discussing this year's lack of nominees of color. For example, not one woman of color was nominated for lead actress in a comedy. This year, just 26 nominees were people of color compared to 38 last year, and just 3 people of color ended up winning. RuPaul Charles for hosting RuPaul's Drag Race, Jarrell Jerome won for When They See Us, and Bill Porter won for Pose. The FCC released its open meeting agenda. A proposal for $950 million in funding for Puerto Rico's communications infrastructure is first on the agenda. The New York Times is ending Spanish language coverage. While the Espanol site did attract a new audience for our journalism and consistently produced coverage we are very proud of, the Times said in a statement, it did not prove financially successful. New York Times and Espanol launched in response to President Trump's hate speech against Mexicans. NBC Universal has launched a new streaming service dubbed Peacock, which is slated for launch in April. NBC Universal will join the long list of new Netflix streaming competitors, including the likes of Disney, Apple, and HBO Max. And you can find links to all of these stories in the show notes and also in our Twitter feed, and our handle is @WashingTech. Stay with us.
Policy is global policy. This is the Washington Tech Policy Podcast, serving the world.
My guest today is Jeffrey Cole. He's been at the forefront of media and communications technology issues both in the United States and internationally for the past 3 decades. An expert in the field of technology and emerging media, Cole serves as an advisor to governments and leading companies around the world as they craft digital strategies. In July 2004, Dr. Cole joined the USC Annenberg School for Communications as director of the newly formed Center for Digital Future and as a research professor. Prior to joining USC, Dr. Cole was a longtime member of the UCLA faculty. Please welcome Dr. Jeffrey Cole. Jeff, thanks for joining me.
Joe, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Netflix, like Google and Xerox before it, is a verb. When someone invites one to Netflix and chill, one knows exactly what it means. But can Netflix's dominance as the number one streaming service prevail amidst increasing competition from the likes of Disney, Apple, and Universal? Each of these companies has released or is in the process of releasing its own streaming service. What do you see as the 4 or 5 biggest threats to Netflix's business model?
Well, you're absolutely right. The business model's under challenge. The streaming wars are about to begin on November 12th when Disney Plus goes online. And incidentally, being a verb like Google or Xerox is not necessarily a good thing long term. It means you've made an impact, but look what's happened to Xerox. So we'll see. But anyway, Netflix has been able to dominate for 7 years. Streaming and Netflix were synonymous. They're almost everybody's first $10 a month spent on content. That's about to change. The consumer is about to get screwed. What the consumer's gotten for $10 a month, all this content from Disney, Warner, Fox, Universal, Paramount, Sony, to replicate in 3 years, they're going to have to spend $40 to $50. And I don't think the consumer is going to do that. Netflix has been able to get all of this programming, spend $12 billion on original programming because they've grown so rapidly. As they lose Friends, as they lose The Office, as they lose all the Marvel, Pixar, I think there's going to be one among several services, and I think we're really going to see competition, and I don't think they're going to be so special over the long term.
So when it comes to syndication, you've said that Netflix pays large production salaries up front to sweeten the pot for creators and producers who'd otherwise be able to get their content syndicated under the old model. How much more does Netflix pay creators and producers up front than TV studios pay up front under the old model?
Well, first of all, many of the most successful television shows have been operating at a deficit, where the network that funds them doesn't pay the producers, studios, sometimes enough to support the show, particularly as the show gets successful and salaries go up. So the whole traditional television world is after a show like Big Bang or Friends or 2.5 Men or Seinfeld runs on the network, the producers own it and can sell it in syndication. And we've just seen in the last week, Big Bang Theory collected $1 billion from Warner for the rights to stream. And that's not counting what TBS and all the other people pay. So traditionally, the salaries were more modest, not modest by human everyday standards. Netflix wants to own this stuff in perpetuity. It wants to be running all the stuff it creates. So it's been paying significantly more upfront to producers because there's no big payday at the end. There's no ability to collect for a handful of people billions of dollars, and billionaires have been made. So Netflix tends to pay about 25 to 35% more upfront because there is no back end. That I think is going to have to change if they want to be competitive.
Interesting. And as far as ratings are concerned, Nielsen, the rating service for traditional TV and radio, has started tracking how viewers stream content. Could Nielsen's ratings make it easier for Netflix to decide which shows to keep beyond 2 or 3 seasons? And should they?
Well, Netflix has great ratings information. They just don't release it. Traditionally, the whole point of ratings in Nielsen was you had to measure how many people were watching something because advertisers pay on the size of the audience. So it was that Nielsen data that determined advertising rates. There is no advertising, at least yet, on Netflix. So they do know how many people watch because that determines which shows they keep and what they do with them. But they've never had to share that with anybody because there's no advertisers to charge. So they have great data. They have the best data because they don't have to do a sample of how many are watching. Netflix literally knows how many people and which ones are watching their shows. They just don't share that, except when it's convenient for them to share it. They want to make a point, they'll share it.
And you've suggested elsewhere that perhaps Netflix should begin to implement more of an advertising model. And, as far as whether streaming services should feature commercials, I've been considering making some changes to the imaging of the podcast. And by imaging, for those who don't know, just means the way it sounds. So I've been shopping around for some new announcers. And there's one announcer at this radio station in Arizona. And I was listening to her for an hour, and I don't think she did one break. It was all just station identifiers, concert promos, and commercials, along with the music, of course. So radio stations have apparently decided that to compete with Spotify, that they don't have advertising for their premium subscribers, that they need to have less talk. And so that's never going to happen at the expense of advertising, right? So they start with the low-hanging fruit and having the jocks talk less, the jocks, the DJs on air talk less, so it's less personality-driven. But you say that Netflix shouldn't follow Spotify's model by charging a premium for advertising or for not having advertising, and they should go ahead and open up the platform for commercials anyway. How would that work for a platform like Spotify? How do you see a need for Spotify to do the same thing? Is that even a comparison we can make?
It's a really interesting question. Well, first, I'm not arguing that Netflix should move to advertising. I'm arguing they're going to have to. As programming is going to cost more and more, and they're going to grow less because there's competition, it's the only place they can go for additional revenue. So I think even though it violates their DNA, they're going to have to go to advertising. Incidentally, our work shows that while people say they hate advertising, and to some degree they do, what they really hate is advertising that interrupts the show. They're a little more tolerant of pre-roll, post-roll. TiVo this week announced they're moving to advertising. So I think there may well be a hybrid model like Spotify or Hulu uses, where Hulu you can get for $4.95 a month with advertising and 10 or 11 without, and Spotify's the same thing. So you may indeed see a hybrid model, but the non-advertising model for Netflix is going to be more than $10 or $12. The problem is they can't deliver what they've been delivering for that over the long haul.
Well, Jeff, it's been truly a privilege having you on the show. It's just been a fascinating conversation. Now let's turn to your icebreaker question. Hear about the best piece of career advice you've ever received and find out about what you're reading, watching, and listening to these days. Okay, so it's time for this week's icebreaker. If you could live in any sitcom, which one would it be?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. If I could live within any television show, it would be The West Wing, because that's the way I want our country to be. But that's not a sitcom. If I were to live within any sitcom, I'm a big believer in quality journalism and the truth. I think I'd go back to Murphy Brown.
Oh, wow.
Where that's the world I'd like to live in.
Now I'd go back to Night Court.
I love Night Court. Filled with loons and crazies.
Right.
But a great show.
That's right. Now, what's the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
It's so generic, but it's so valuable, is to really go with your passion. My favorite, my guiding principle in life came from Citizen Kane. There's a line in Citizen Kane where he's looking back on his life very successfully. It's a thinly veiled portrait of William Randolph Hearst. And Kane says, it's not hard to make a lot of money if all you want to do is make a lot of money. So I really believe you want to make a lot of money, go with your passion, do what you love, do what you're best at. And not only will you be happiest, you'll probably be most successful. And I've tried to follow that.
What are you reading, watching, or jamming out to these days? Any podcasts? Any albums?
I am reading, watching everything. The problem with television is we now have these pangs of anxiety. Everyone tells us all this great television we should watch, from the Emmys. Now I obviously have to sit down and watch Fleabag. which won most of the Emmys this year. I try to read as much as I can, and I'm lucky to live in LA and a little bit of New York, and always breakfast, lunch, and dinner, meeting people, hearing what's going on. So research is just opening your eyes to everything.
Well, thanks again, Jeff, for joining me. Final ideas before we close.
I think this is going to be the most interesting era in media the next year since at least the beginning of television in the late 40s. I think all the players are changing. We're seeing consolidation. I think the consumer is more in control than he or she has ever been. This may end up being the most important 12 months in the history of the media business, but at least since the beginning of television. And I think it's really going to end up with more and more power in the hands of viewers.
Fascinating discussion. And you've been listening to Jeff Cole, founder and director of the Center for a Digital Future at USC Annenberg. Jeff, thanks for taking the time.
So, thank you. Really appreciate it.
That concludes episode 202 of the podcast. Thanks so much to all of you for listening. If you like what we do, we'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment, head over to Apple Podcasts, give it a review. It helps others know what they can expect from us and really helps us out. Thanks for listening. I'll see you back here next week. Take care.
Washington Tech.